Welcome everyone to our first webinar of 2022, Journaling About My Journey with Parkinson's, an illness I knew nothing about. We're honored to have one of our past presenters and a good friend of ours, Dr. Dan Stultz, present today. This is being recorded, so you can view this at a later time on our YouTube channel. I will also send a follow-up email with the recording. And we ask that everyone please mute themselves during the presentation, and there will be time to ask questions, in which at that time you can input a question in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask the question.
Casey, you're muted.
Oops. Okay, we're welcomed with David Von Hoven, our Director of Programs, Christine Haythorne, our CEO and Executive Director, and Lauren O'Neill, our newest employee and colleague, who's doing design work and helping with so much more. Okay, let's get started. Journaling about my journey with Parkinson's. Our presenter, Dr. Dan Stultz. He practiced internal medicine in San Angelo, Texas for 28 years. Dr. Dan retired in 2014 as president and CEO of Texas Hospital Association. Dr. Stultz received the American Hospital Association's Honorary Life Membership Award in 2016. Dr. Dan was featured in the 2020 documentary film Empowered by Parkinson's. In 2007, Dr. Stultz was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And 5 years later, he underwent deep brain stimulation. Dr. Stultz, who is a wonderful partner and friend of ours, who joined us last year for our symposium in April, returns, gives us his time so graciously, and he certainly enjoys writing. He's going to be sharing 3 of his writings from his 15-year journey with Parkinson's through his journal. He enjoys welding projects, knife making, and spending time with his wife of 48 years, 3 children, and 8 grandchildren. So, without further ado, Dr. Stultz.
Thank you, Casey, and good to see David again.
Welcome.
Hello, once again from the state of Texas, where there's no place like our sunsets, and you never can imagine what our governor will say next or what our legislature may do. We used to have a saying at THA, PFMA, plucked from midair, which is sometimes I think where they get some of their ideas. As Casey said, I'm a retired internist. I served 7 years as CEO of a health system in West Texas, and 7 years as president and CEO of a 300-member Texas Hospital Association. But I grew up as a Cowboys fan in Dallas, and I've liked Ben Roethlisberger ever since he was a rookie getting in trouble. So we're both on the sidelines now, the Cowboys and the Steelers. And I know that Dave Parkinson of the 1979 World Champ Pirates has spoken to you. What I would like to do today is present my journey, my thoughts, my journal thoughts to you, share experience and see how we compare. I know we share a bunch of signs and symptoms that are not spoken of too much. I went to an awards dinner recently, and a friend asked how my Parkinson's was doing, and I said, "Great, as long as they don't serve soup and spaghetti." He said, "I don't get it." I said, "Well, you would if you had this. You couldn't eat supper." I have had Parkinson's for 15 years. I started my dream job a little over a year before I was diagnosed. I had DBS in 2012 and 2013. And I got a tremendous benefit from it. This year, I'm going into 2022 with balance issues, a small bilateral tremor, degenerative shoulders, a weak dominant right hand, chronically enlarged prostate that gets me up 2 to 3 times a night unless I don't drink liquids after 7, and periodontal disease that my dentist wants me to drink more water for at bedtime and take a moisturizing pill for. I take a diuretic. My other doctor gives me for hypertension, which makes me urinate and dries my mouth. I've had 2 bad episodes of dehydration and low potassium from the diuretic causing leg cramps. The cramps keep me up at night. Chronic insomnia from Parkinson's doesn't help when my neurologist won't renew my sleeping pill 1 day early. I taught fluids and electrolytes at the nursing school in San Angelo, but I still got the low potassium. The coach is not always the best swimmer. As the guy said, other than that, Ms. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play? I make knives and welding projects when I have them, and I like to hunt feral hogs in West Texas. I'd like to read you a couple of brief vignettes from my journal and use them to discuss an insider's view of Parkinson's disease and how we deal with serious issues. They're all short. If you're interested, Casey can get you copies. Well, if we start with what I've entitled Ups, Downs, and Cheesecake. One of the things that bothers me about Parkinson's disease, or the animal, is about the time you think things are going well, things worsen. By the same token, during the journey, for some reason, things will get better. Worries and improvements often come out of the blue. A month of good sleep followed by a month of poor sleep rather randomly. My DBS seems to be failing, and then, whoa, I get an adjustment and things are better. I start feeling as if I won't be able to put on my socks for another month, and then things for no apparent reason turn for the better. It all looks brighter. While this is going on, I'm looking for causes. Did I miss a dose of medicine? Did I do something physically that created these symptoms? Maybe it's caused by something other than Parkinson's. I look for an extra pill or activity that may have caused my clinical path to vary. We all have ups and downs in life, and Parkinson's is no different. Does that sound familiar to you? Medications and rugs are 2 things that will trip you up. So it is wise to have a reliable system to reload your medicine. Multiple days multiple days and you will become familiar with what each dose looks like. So you can sense if there's too many pills in your hand. I look at my pills every morning and think, does that look right? Because I take so many, not for Parkinson's disease, but other things, that it's easy to miss one. I load my pill pack for 10 days at a time. I wish I could load it for 30 if the doctor would give me enough. But I do it for 30 minutes. I load it 10 days at a time when I'm really having a good day, so that I don't slip up and mismedicate myself. Oh, back to the reading. I look back on 15 years, and Parkinson's has not been a progressive degenerative neurologic disease in how I live and interact and spend time with family. When I lump it by decades, and to use Lincoln term scores, 20 years, yes, it is worse. But we don't live by decades. We live a day at a time. We live with life's punches and life thrown seemingly at random at us and weekly. And we have ups and downs, whether we have a chronic disease or not. In that sense, existentially, my life has not been changed by Parkinson's. Let me repeat that. My life has not been changed by Parkinson's disease. I had no plans for what I would be doing at age 71. I'm glad I'm here, but I didn't assume that I would get to my 7th decade unscathed. At 71, my life journey is not where I would prefer it, but it is what it is. I certainly did not assume when I was 18 that I would save all my vacation time and money and that I would be disease-free. I take medication, I've had surgery, I don't like turnips, and I love cheesecake. Yes, some of my medications are for Parkinson's and others are for hypertension, urinary flow, high cholesterol. The etiologies of my various surgeries vary from sports injuries to Parkinson's, yes, but due to disease like ruptured disc at L3, 4, 5. In fact, most of my time in the operating room has been about my knees, not about my noggin. I've had 6 knee operations. Those life punches may also come from inherited, infectious, traumatic, and age-related diseases. Alcohol, risky behaviors, and self-induced disease also affect how we get hit. Our faith may determine if those punches seem essentially or especially focused or sequenced by another power. So that's the end of that part. I choose to see the Parkinson's animal.
This is the doctor on the Parkinson's.
Hmm?
He's an internist.
Okay.
Just make sure you're muted, please.
I choose to see the animal like hypertension or prostate enlargement, just part of the disease burden I carry. It requires a little more care each day. Okay, it requires a lot more care. Speech, OT, PT, cognitive exercise, facial exercises, working out in the gym, attention to risk, all are like avoiding salt for hypertension. They all are treatments other than medication. Normal life is a series of ups and downs, slips and falls all the way through. I used to run long distances, not anymore. But it's not because of Parkinson's, it's because I have arthritis and knee problems. I don't like to hoe in my garden like I used to, not caused by Parkinson's, but because I have low back pain. It gets worse when I use lawn tools. Losing those activities, I can't do them anymore, does not bother me. I get that. We are continually evolving ups and downs of various medical interruptions that alter life's path directions. We assume that we will live without disease, but we know better. We do not get Parkinson's and go down the hill quickly after birth any more than we think of life steadily going downhill after birth. Looking at a life a century at a time, we'd see life as Oscar Wilde is said to have written, we're born wet and naked and things get worse. Looking at life by the century, it is short. But looking at life is not the way we don't look at life a century or 10 years or 20 years at a time. In one sense, it's just a matter of perspective. Bill McKinnon put it, life is not a journey to the grave with the intent of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather a skid broadside, totally worn out and proclaiming, wow, what a ride. So that's the end of that. The questions I have is, you may not feel that way about life, but in that sense, I have a little more abandon, if you will. I can tear off those furniture tags that say, do not remove under penalty of law. What are they going to do? Give me Parkinson's disease? It's just another illness. Now, is that denial, or do I think I'm going to do better than the mean? It's a way not to be depressed. It's a way not to be old Judd in the musical Oklahoma. It's a different division. We're on 3. There you go, 3. It's different vision than allows, or that you have to swallow. It's not a 5 or 10 or 20 year sentence. It looks one day at a time. Many of you out there may have had former military training and went to Sears School or Ranger School or SEAL School. And the mantra there is to make the rack every day, one day at a time. Don't anticipate, don't worry about yesterday. Just get through the day, 365 times. That's the way I approached this animal. Parkinson's disease is just another part of my ongoing continuum. I see it like hypertension, diabetes, and arthritis. All are chronic diseases. All of them might contribute to shortening my journey. They did not kill me today or tomorrow, and we manage them with medication. We alter some activities and behaviors. We pay attention to specific symptoms. We deal these chronic illnesses the best in science and faith and medical care will allow us to do. In medical practice, we call that the disease burden you carry. Parkinson's is part of that list. In the short term, there are ups and downs, more ups and downs for all of us. Expect them, plow through the downs, celebrate the ups, and know that the little cheesecake never hurt anybody. So my question, and to start the questions on this section, is do you take time for cheesecake? Or are you so focused on worry all the time that you can't get your mind off that? We get anniversaries. I just had my 50th. We get new medications. We get wins that should be celebrated. Do you worry about today? And if it's going pretty well, do you start to worry about something else? Have you or your relevant other become a worry warrior because of this? Davis Finney talks a lot about this in his talk and on his website. Take time to celebrate the regular stuff like birthdays, anniversaries, wins that you have, life's wins, and eat some cheesecake. You have any questions on that, Casey or David?
No, I think we can move on. And
All
we'll
right.
have time for questions in the end.
All right. The second article I want to read is called Animals That Hunt Us. And if you were on the presentation last year with Alan Cole, this will sound a little bit familiar. I have been preoccupied with Parkinson's disease, the animal, due to difficulty getting my right-sided DBS settings more tuned in. My doctor adjusted the settings Monday and things seemed fine, only to wake up Tuesday with a left-sided tremor and tingling in my right shoulder. I've not had a left-sided tremor since the initial adjustment, just 8 years earlier. Anyway, I'm on my fallback settings now and I feel better, although with dystonia until I can get it adjusted again. Parkinson stalks me even while I'm asleep. That's what launched these thoughts. We characterize the animal Parkinson's disease as primarily a disease of tremor and stiffness, a degenerative disease in which not enough dopamine is made. In a broad sense, it's more sinister than that. We should rename it the reducer or the minimizer for what it does. It reduces our handwriting, it narrows our step, it takes away our senses of smell, balance, and taste. It reduces our network of friends. If you don't believe me, just look around. And over time may reduce our intellect. Major and minor symptoms are all reductions. Bowel function, libido, speech, swallowing, everything reduced and made less. Many times the first sign of Parkinson's disease is notice a lack of smell, another reduction. It reduces ability and skills that have been developed over a lifetime. Think of the ways mentally and physically that Parkinson's tries to reduce you. What are you doing about these reductions? My daughter was in the house over the holidays, me all the things I could do. I said, I am doing that. And that over time, I'm still a little worse. We do what we can do. I do my back stretches for Parkinson's disease in my old back in the morning. I box 3 days a week. I do my voice exercise every day, or at least 5 days a week. I write almost daily, and I read books and work Reduco, daily for cognitive training for speech. I read aloud some of the 5 great pieces of literature. Heck, there's hardly time for Monday Night Football. How can we be sure at the end of the day, we don't look back with regretting, saying, gosh, I wish I could have done this. By living each day, by answering in the positive, I did all I could do today. Yes, sir, I did the best every day since the diagnosis. Now, we won't be able to do that every day, and I skip days of speech saying I got this, or I need a nap instead of exercise, or I need that cheesecake. But the idea is to be intentional about each day, to set the pace, to don't be passive about your day and just let it happen to you. Mark the days to be intentional with the animal. Set the activities. You'll get more done checking off the list rather than trying to explain why things are undone. Make a list, check off your activities, write down what you want to get done, and be intentional with the animal. It drives the animal crazy. Churchill said, action this day. Set a goal. Sign up for speech, dancing, boxing, and yoga. Don Berwick, one of the great minds in quality care in the hospital business, said, soon is not a number. No, some is not a number. Soon is not a time. If I say some people do this, that's not really telling you the number. And soon is not a time. I'm going to sign up for boxing next week. Well, that's not a time. So soon is not a, some is not a number, soon is not a time. It applies to Parkinson's disease. Do it now. Today's the best way to start. Don't slide. Maintain. Keep a list each week. Check off the boxes. That way you keep the animal away. The animal is ever hunting me like a coyote after a rabbit, a hyena trying to reduce me to make me quiet, to take away my ability to walk and my ability to get off the floor. It's a sneaky beast, ever biting at my senses over time. People don't understand that I can't pivot like I used to, and that I don't have the same balance. Getting out of a low chair requires time for strategy. Reductions may not always be noticed by others, but I feel the reduction, the softness of speech, the limited walking ability. It takes me longer to walk a littered path, longer to get dressed, and I don't just pop out of a car anymore. Do you know George Patton, once he got the offensive during World War II, is said to have yelled at Rommel across the North African battlefield, I read your book, you SOB. I read your book on tactics in tank warfare. Well, I read the book on Parkinson's, and it's more than a scientific definition. Parkinson's disease is predatory. And I will use all available weapons to fight back. There's data that exercise helps, but there are new drugs. There's hope that a remission-inducing drug will be found, and ultimately some type of cure. The animal thinks that I'm going to allow DBS to wander off target like it's done recently. But Medtronic has a new application out that makes my DBS even more accurate. And I will be better in another 2 months. I read the book. So that's the end of that one. The point is, animals that hunt us, the Parkinson's disease, I use the metaphor of the animal because it is always aggressive. I read a very nice lady in my boxing group read this week, and she said, well, my animals aren't like that. My animals are nice dogs that take care of me, they give me comfort, and that I walk with. And I said, well, it's a metaphor for a hyena, not a domesticated dog. It's a metaphor for the wolf or a tiger or a stalking hyena. Look at it that way, it applies. And of course, the nice lady of course, she has dogs, and I have border collies that normally chase sheep while they're out chasing each other today. I get it, but the animal is a predatory disease. It takes every opportunity to take advantage of us. You want me to go on? Or do you have questions now?
Why don't we have you continue and then we can talk
See what
about
happens. Okay. There's another slide next. Now, I have to take a sip of water. Okay. This one is a little different. Shield walls, Danes, and Parkinson's disease. The Saxons of the 10th century fought using what was called a shield wall as their standard defense against roaming Dane and Viking armies. They learned the defense tactic from the Romans, who learned it from the Greeks. It's said that the Spartan king Leonidas used a shield wall at Thermopylae against the Persians, although the Persians outnumbered him 20-fold. The idea was for soldiers to line up wherein their shields would touch and form a mobile wall. The shield wall might stretch for hundreds of yards, and a vanguard troop of cavalry at the edges would keep attackers from flanking the defenders. At times, the shield wall was formed in the shape of a large oval or a circle that could actually march into battle, 300 warriors at a time. They formed the wall several men deep so that when a man fell, another was behind him to ensure the integrity of the wall. This defense group even worked against the dreaded cavalry. The Viking war axe were used by attackers to hatchet down on top of the opponent's wall and pull down their shield, thus exposing the defenders behind. It must have been a grisly and awful way to fight. 800 years later, Wellington would use the British square against Napoleon, and the squares mauled the opposing French cavalry. The British square was a battle evolution of a disease 3,000 years before. I bought a miniature of a Viking war axe. And if you've seen Viking hammers, they had this cutout part right here, characteristic of a Viking weapon. And that's what was used to hook the shield wall. I was going to hook the top of my laptop, hook the shield wall and pull it down. Distinct to Vikings, they used this and battled against shield walls for hundreds of years. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? I'm trying to describe a battlefield tactic that was used for thousands of years. Imagine lining up in a shield wall against Vikings with maybe 500 of them running at your wall to attack. On bad days, does it seem like you're at war with Parkinson's disease? Ever felt like you were delivering a blow to Parkinson's disease when you accomplished something, got on a cufflink on your non-dominant hand, accomplished something you didn't think you could do? Feels pretty good. See if this next part of the metaphor sounds familiar. Now we are engaged in a war wherein the attacker, the Dane, if you will, is Parkinson's disease. Sometimes these battles are just as grisly, with falls and balance issues causing open fractures, bleeding head wounds. The attacker, if allowed, used all sorts of infections and mental games in laying siege to us, causing bruising and cuts and broken bone early on if we're not careful. In my boxing group, we've had 5 fighters out of about 25. 5 fighters this year have fractures. However, we get time to prepare as Parkinson's disease announces its intent years in advance by small hints and early diagnosis. We get to see that army coming before the real siege starts. We need the time to get our protection organized and prioritize. The bad news is that Parkinson's will never withdraw, and it will gradually intensify the battle. The good news is that we can defend shield wall after shield wall, backing up on the battlements using multiple defenses. Defenses include vaccines for pneumonia and COVID, deep brain stimulation, an early emphasis on exercise, speech pathology, rehab therapy. More and more are put into the wall as they develop. I draw this analogy to 10th century warfare, but it was because it was gruesome close combat. And we really need to realize how gruesome that war becomes, especially if the enemy is at the gate. Most people have signs and symptoms for a year before diagnosis, and we get plenty of time to prepare, but people get this disease and yet stay in denial. People with Parkinson's need to remove themselves from society, tend to remove themselves from society early and retreat into self-imposed isolation. It's better to turn and fight the enemy early. Our shield walls are gradually but inevitably penetrated by Parkinson's disease, and then we retreat to other offenses and defenses. We should count our victories. Our goal is to survive the next battle and fall back if needed to fight another day. The attacker wants to slice you off from the pack, to isolate you mentally and physically, and tell you how bad it is so that you'll lay down and quit fighting. But there's no mercy coming from Parkinson's. It does not provide for surrender. We are saved by Parkinson's only by another disease or illness or old age, and we can outlast Parkinson's, but there's no quarter ever given. We must fight and buy time for research and at least a remission-inducing drug. When do I go to speech pathology? When do I go to PT? How will I do after a knee operation? Where will I go to see an OT? Can speech therapy prevent swallowing problems? What happens if I have to have an operation about my DBS programmer? All these shield wall questions need to be addressed. Well, I'm in the shield wall at midpoint between the front gate and my castle keep. I've been at this war for 15 years. My fellow warriors are from this area, and we know there are more defenders in the region who are on their own. Some are better warriors than others. Some are gone. We've had losses, and our shield wall is bloodied. As a retired internist for 28 years, and 15 years with this illness, I am a warlord. I have seen too much already. Next attack, fixed in determination, defiant. I will have more shield walls to fight alongside, but I know I can never leave the shield wall again. I'll never be able to get out of a chair without thinking of just what's outside the wall. You may not feel the same way. And maybe this puts battle in a different perspective using a shield wall metaphor. But did you feel like for a minute that you've been up against the Danes while I was reading this? Try to make a list of your defenses and then look at the therapies available. You may find that you're not doing all that you can. It's like taking half a dose of chemotherapy with cancer or putting a splint on a fracture when it calls for a cast. You must play hard from the start. You can't fight this disease until you find it at the gate. You got to get out ahead of it and defend it. You must identify your weaknesses and start early. Apply yourself to achieve the best defense. Make a list. Fill in what you're not doing and find out from the foundation how you can take advantage of the shield wall to help you. Now questions, Casey.
Okay, would you like?
The shield wall metaphor is a little harsh, because it puts the battle in close perspective. And it gives you the image through the metaphor of a real battlefield. But indeed, that's what this is. You can call it by any other names, call it a degenerative disease if you want to, but this disease is after us, and we have to defend it. This seems especially appropriate, and I just found this last week, given the spirit of fear that so many people have about the disease or the diagnosis. It's like a death sentence to them, and it need not be. I don't know what time it is.
We have time. Would you like to open it up for questions now, or would you
Sure.
like me
Sure.
to move forward to my next to your last slide?
Oh, you can open it up for questions.
Okay.
Hi,
Carolyn?
Casey.
Yes.
Karen Schaller here. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Karen.
Hi, David. Dr. Stultz, I just wanted to say that your presentation today goes along so very well with an essay that I read in PDYs a couple of months ago called Feeling Welcome. You made such great points in that, and how you can marry that with what you said today, especially taking 365 days a year, one day at a time. I hope that everybody here has read that essay because it was really, really good.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate Alan publishing my stuff. It's nice. Yeah, I was just talking to David about that. How nice the Parkinson's community is. I can't explain that.
Thank you, Karen.
You're
There is-
welcome.
There is a question in the chat about when should I have DBS, earlier or later? I know that you can't give medical advice, but I just wanted to bring that question to your view.
I'm no longer practicing. I don't give medical advice. I give just personal advice about having the animal. But for me, at age 62, DBS was life-changing. And I had it early. I had it 5 years after the diagnosis, which they consider early then. And they will tell you that DBS is just about the tremor. But for me, it was so much more. It helped my balance. It helped my judgment. I think I was smarter, longer, less forgetful. I mean, I think the magic of DBS is yet totally unknown. To give you an example, the day before my DBS surgery, I had to go off all my medicines. And I literally could not hold a pencil. This is the way I was before DBS. I couldn't, they wouldn't, they had a hard time getting me on the operating table because I couldn't reach over and grab the bed and help lift myself, and I weighed 250. I mean, it was awful. I don't think I'd be here today if I didn't have DBS. And I certainly wouldn't be hunting feral pigs in West Texas. So for me personally, DBS done early was a great gift. And I appreciate my doctor so much for pushing me a little bit. I said, well, I haven't run the gamut of all the medicine. He said, you're not supposed to. I need to get you DBS before you take all those drugs and you get immune to it. So DBS for me was not a forlorn hope, throw it against the wall at the end, but rather a very preemptive strike, if you will. And I had one side that didn't work. So I had to go back in the operating room for another time to have it redone. And I willingly, gladly, hopefully went in to have the second side done, my right side. So for me, DBS is something that, for me personally, I was very, very glad that it was done early in my course. I'm not as fine-tuned as I was. I hit my peak about year 6, where I had no tremor. And I have a little tremor coming back on the right side now. But that's pretty good given the fact that I couldn't hardly eat in 2011. So it's still working. I still get tremendous variation when she adjusts me. So for me, it was a godsend to have it early. If there's a follow-up to that question, I'll be glad to try to answer it too.
Thank you, Dr. Dan. You're welcome to comment or ask questions about any of Dan's writings or
Or you
his
can you
journey.
can ask me about anything. I appreciate the comment about the Parkinson's community, which has been so supportive.
And thank you, Karen, who shared in the chat the feeling welcome writing. I have a question, Dr. Dan Stultz. How often do you write? Journal.
Yeah, I try to write 3 days a week. And I force myself to do that, just like I force myself to do those dang speech exercises. I box 3 days a week. I do my back exercises every morning. And I try to write 3 days a week after I box. And generally after I take a nap. I come in from boxing, I'm exhausted, and I take a nap. And then I try to write purposefully with intent. Most of it's garbage. But I keep a journal. I've got about 20 over the last 32 years. And it's good for me. It releases, it gets my thoughts on paper. I get it out of me somehow. And like I say, not much of it's reproducible. But every once in a while I get on a theme, like I got locked into that shield wall thing, reading a novel. So.
Thank you. We have a question.
I've got some comments.
Oh,
Steve
nope.
Sack.
Go ahead, Steve, and then Donna, you'll be next.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
All right. I'm really glad to hear your analogy, because I'm fighting the disease and I'm doing all the items that you're talking about. And I was getting to the point where I'm saying, should I be doing this? Is it working? Because you get tired.
Yes.
You get tired, and I really like what you've done. I highly recommend everything that you've done, and it's great to hear somebody that has similar problems. One of the problems I have is sleeping, getting on a schedule. I don't want to be on a schedule. I was a scheduler all my whole life. I'm retired. I don't want to be on a schedule, but I have to be. And that's what I fight against. That's one of my biggest problems.
Yeah, sleep is something that is so under talked about. That's not correct English. It's so under described. I think that was probably a problem that I had early on and didn't recognize it, didn't know about it in Parkinson's disease till I read about it. And it's a problem. And it's like I said in the opening, it's a problem because I get mixed signals from the diseases and my doctors. They want me to drink more, but then I don't sleep because I have to get up 5 times a night. So insomnia is a real booger bear. I take temazepam now, and I have been for about 3 years, and it really, really helps me. But last night I woke up, I didn't wake up. I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning because I hadn't been asleep. And I looked in the pill pack, and sure enough, there it was. There's that temazepam. I emptied the pill pack and it stuck in the bottom. So I took it, went to sleep 30, 45 minutes later. Sleep is a real bugaboo. And I know what you say about schedule. My wife goes to bed about 9:30, and that's too early for me. So if I go to bed at 10:30, it hits it about right. Hits it about right, I stay on schedule. Provided there's no overtime.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you.
Have you had DBS?
No, I'm hesitant to get that. Actually, I'm not at any
You may, I don't know that you're a candidate for it, or I don't know that anything about it. So I'm not judging. I was just curious.
yeah. Well, right now I'm not on any medication for the tremors. I don't have tremors, I freeze.
Oh, see, I don't have freezing.
Yeah, but I did notice a little bit of tremor, but that's when I get nervous or upset and a little bit, but I can control it.
Right.
So I'm holding off as long as I can,
Yeah,
and it's working. I still have a sense of smell.
good.
So, but I appreciate what you said. I'd like to get a copy of this and look at it 3 times a day.
You're welcome to it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you both. I'll be sending a follow-up email with all of the materials. Now, Donna, go ahead and unmute yourself as you had a question, I believe.
Yeah, Dan, I wanted to ask you a little bit about DBS. Let me turn Vicky's volume down. Hold on a minute. I'm the caregiver for Dr. Vicky Herbert. She's a doctor with Parkinson's as well, she was an endocrinologist, and she had to retire, and she's had Parkinson's for 20 years and has
Wow.
DBS for 10 years with Medtronics as well.
Right.
And she did not have tremor. She had freezing and stiffness like Steve. And her DBS system lasted very good for like 5 years. And then I was wondering how often you go in for setting changes, because I find that's the problem. Once you get on if they do an accurate mapping at the beginning of DBS and they set up the settings, they tend to stay the same, and then they just keep up on the amplitude or the pulse width or the frequency. And you get to a point where your batteries are needing replaced longer and longer. And I just wondered how often you go for settings, and have they ever changed your settings with an electrodes, or like change the actual electrode settings, or just let them the same as that initial mapping?
No, they change them frequently. I go every 6 weeks. I see my doctor theoretically every 3 months, but I go every 6 weeks because of DBS. And I wouldn't say that it's higher, it's just different. My pulse width and my not really the amplitude, but my pulse width and my frequency changed over the last 6 years, but I'm still extremely sensitive to it, but it does wander a little bit. Now, here's a complicating factor, and this may answer a question that's in the queue. The DBS has tremendous effect when I take Cinemet and Encaptone and amantadine at the same time. So I take most of my Cinemet at bedtime, and then I'm virtually off of it now. I'm not taking any through the day. And my doctor, she may be watching this, and she is, she may not like it, but my doctor's giving me some latitude to adjust and see. Well, if I take, my DBS is doing so good, if I take Cinemet, it messes up my voice and it pulls me to the right, and I get like this for 3 hours, and then I get back again and I'm okay. So it's as if the Cinemet, I take Ritari, but levodopa, carbidopa, whatever. It's almost as if that over medicates me. And so I do better, I find, when I take the Cinemet, the carbidopa, levodopa, just at bedtime. And then if I get real depleted, and you can tell when you're out of carbidopa, levodopa, if I get real depleted, I take it, but otherwise I try not to take it until the next night. Now, why do I take it at night? I first started on it before DBS 4 times a day, and I whittled it down to 1 at bedtime just in the last 3 weeks, because I found that I did a lot better speaking, and taking it more frequently was jacking up this shoulder and making me stiff on my right side. So it's a very fluid combination of both DBS and carbidopa, levodopa that makes it, there's a lot of wiggle room. It's hard to interpret sometimes what's causing what, but you bring up a very good point, Donna. Also, in that there's a difference between the types of Parkinson's disease that makes the application of that treatment, DBS, different. So I have a hard time commenting too much about your patient, because I'm not sure in the stiffness component type Parkinson's disease what and when you should use DBS. I was tremor dominant, badly tremor dominant, and I still don't have to. I still pass that cognitive, that rigidity test. I don't have any of that. So it's weird. Like they say in like they say about the disease, if you've seen one case, you've seen one case.
Right, you are. Yep. But, and do you have the Activa PC, or what Medtronic's device do you have?
I have the one that put in 2012, but I do have a new.
Yes.
Is that Donna?
You have the greatest phone voice.
No, I don't think it's Donna. I muted her though.
Oh, I do have the new battery. My battery life is now 14 years. I've had it replaced twice. I got 4 years out of each one. I've got 2 batteries because I had 2 different interventions, and they put it in my abdomen because I shoot. And so they put it in my abdomen. So I have 2 batteries. They wouldn't do that now, but back in the day, if it did one side first and then they did the other side, and then this one had to be replaced.
Well, thank you for
Thank you.
answering.
Good question.
Yeah, thank you. We have one additional question back to your writings. How often do you reflect on your past writings?
Weekly. I do 2 things. I try to not write the same stuff, which is a tendency. And I try not to let anything go unedited. So if I don't have anything going on, I don't have a spark or a creative idea, I pull out an old piece and rework it. And I always find not just a spelling error, but my diction, my grammar. I took a lot more biology than I took English. And so I find myself having to really work on the grammar and not start each sentence with a prepositional phrase, that kind of stuff.
Thank you. And would you like me to share your last slide, Dr.
Sure.
Dan? Okay.
I want to say that as an emphasis, the vaccine is tremendous. The boosters are safe, especially for Parkinson's disease. If you haven't had the vaccine, you should get it. If you haven't had the booster, you should get it. These vaccines are made chemically. They're not grown on duck or chicken embryos. They're a lot less antigenic. They cause a lot less reaction. And if you look back over the last century when I was in practice, the thing that really made a difference in all the history of medicine that got the life expectancy from 49 at the turn of the last century to 76 at the turn of this century, it was vaccines that made the difference, not antibiotics, vaccine. Antibiotics help, but all the diseases have been wiped out. When I was a kid, it was a polio epidemic and smallpox, and we finally got rid of that. And now we don't have to take a smallpox vaccine. But all these diseases have virtually been eliminated with the use of vaccines. So if you haven't had the vaccine and are afraid of it, please don't be. Tony Fauci is a good friend of mine. I'm not necessarily a good friend of his, but I know who he is for a long time and have met him several times. He is a star doctor. And if he said, let's go this way, I would follow. So get the vaccine and get the booster.
Thank you, Dr. Dan. Any last words, any parting words?
From me?
Yes, from you.
No, I enjoy it. I appreciate it very much. It's good to see David. Good to see you, Casey. You'll have a great organization. They're lucky to have you. We're trying to duplicate something like it down here with a foundation adopting a Parkinson support group. They're actually doing it, not me. And it's a great model for help because the Parkinson's community is extensive. This is a retirement community. I would say probably 70% of the population is Medicare age. So there's a lot of Parkinson's down here. We have 4 good movement disorder doctors within 50 miles of here. So
Great.
I appreciate the work y'all are doing.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Dan, I have one more question, and that is to your point about movement disorder specialists. Here you are a practicing physician, and you said you knew nothing about Parkinson's disease. What advice would you give to people as they seek someone to help manage them through their care?
Well, first of all, you should see a movement disorder person. Secondly, you should read everything you can find about it. Ignorance is never bliss. But thirdly, it's a partnership. And you got to have a doctor that's willing to work with you, let you adjust your medicine. They know, I know when I was practicing, people weren't taking the medicine necessarily the way I practice arthritis, mostly arthritis. And I knew that my rheumatoid was taking more steroid than they were supposed to. But it's a partnership. You got to give and take and push and shove back and forth about what you're going to do. And that's required both for DBS and for the management of long-term Parkinson's medicine. It has side effects. And I've learned a tremendous amount from my physician. I've learned a tremendous amount on my own. But if you get a doctor that when you come in, they say, sit down and do this, and there's no room for variation, and you can't have an opinion, I'd look for another one, because it takes a partnership with a movement disorders person to manage this animal. If that's blunt enough.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Let's go
Yeah.
fight the animal.
There you
That's
go.
right. Go fight the animal. That's a nice boxing stance. Well, we will
Thank
see you
you.
next time.
Thank you very
again.
much.
And
Okay.
Dr. Dan, thanks for doing this webinar. I don't have Parkinson's disease, but I tell you what, it gave me so much insight into how to move forward. Thank you.
Mhm.
You're welcome. My
Yes,
And
pleasure.
one
thank
of
you
the
for-
things that I always appreciate about journaling is in my mind, looking back, I have a tendency to focus on the negative, but when I journal, I really try to focus on the good things that are happening too. And then when I go back, it's almost like reading a list of blessings
There you
as
go.
opposed to, all the downsides of things.
Hmm.
That's right.
That's beautiful, David.
Absolutely.
Yeah, write that down.
Feeling inspired. Okay, well, bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Goodbye. Bye, David.
Bye.
Bye.